Disappearances are never clean. They leave behind outlines, burn marks in snow, footprints that end mid-step. First, it's the voice, yours or theirs, swept into a static hush as if edited from the air. Then it's color, a fading of reds into rust, sky into gray water. Faces smudge, like wet ink. Names forget themselves. Photographs blur without warning. Doors lead nowhere or to rooms rearranged by unseen hands. You try to speak. Your mouth moves like memory, but the sound won't follow. It happens slow, then all at once. A drifting, a slip, a soft glitch in the fabric of here. You try to retrace your path, but the path has no memory. You knock, but the door has been unbuilt. You call, but the syllables dissolve mid-vowel. You find yourself lost and alone in the minus world. Episode 3. Ephemera.
Feeling rundown, foggy in the morning? That's no way to greet the day. A reach for you back. The revitalizing oral tonic trusted by housewives and heroes alike. 1 tablespoon and you're back on your feet, ready to give it your all for work and country. You back. It brings you back.
The city of storms. The horizon was broken, a jagged sculpture of light and shimmer, 100 spires reaching up like the frozen fingers of the storm god himself. They pierced the cobalt sky, not stone, not steel, but a lattice of glass and silicon. Melted sand, lifted to heaven by lightning's hand. They called it the City of Storms, and that name sang in every wall, rang from every mirrored tower, and echoed in the hearts of the people who lived beneath its glinting canopy. It rose, rainbow-wrapped, reds, blues, yellows, greens, hues without name, born from heat and holiness. These colors were not ornament. They were memory. They were epochs. Each tint, a reign. Each fracture, a story. Each shimmer, a generation gone but not forgotten. Beneath the towers, life braided itself into the mosaic. They were sculptors, cutters of light, singers of wind, dancers of dust. Children raced through alleyways of obsidian blue and quartz, white. Chimes ringing behind them like 1,000 tiny storms in laughter. Mothers wove silk as soft as the breeze that follows lightning. Fathers hammered glass into music. The old told stories on woven mats, under colored lanterns, their words shaping the past like fingers pressing clay. Each building was a sculpture, each sculpture a home, each home a monument to the artistry of those chosen to live in the storm god's cathedral. And what a god he was! Not seen, but felt, not prayed to, but honored. A god of skyfire and upheaval, who melted sand into dreams and left a city in his wake. They said, 100 years passed. A storm unlike any before swept across the empty waste. It struck without warning, without mercy, without pause. And when it passed, the desert was not a desert, but a garden of glass. Lightning had written its scripture in molten language. Wind had carved pillars, and from whose dunes rose spires like cathedral notes. Ascending, the people came, drawn like moths to the glow, and they built within the god's masterpiece, and they stayed. They lived not just among the glass, they lived within it. Seraphine, the thunder violinist, played symphonies in the echo chambers of the high halls. Tyrannus, the glass mason, shaped vases that roared in the rain. Scribes wrote in curling ink, their scrolls pressed against the pulse of lightning-born walls. And at the city's center, the temple, one spire, whole and untouched, carved from within, its every crevice a hymn. Here, the priests and priestesses lit storm fires at dawn, chanting into the clouds, offering salt and sand and glass dust, not in fear, but in gratitude. For they all knew the truth. This city would not last. It was not made to. The desert is patient, and the dunes are always hungry. Glass is strong, but it cuts, and it breaks. They knew. One day, the storm god would return. The sky would split, the lightning would fall, the towers would melt, and from their ashes a new city would rise. Another masterpiece, another cycle. Destruction was never punishment. It was birth. So they danced. Every year when the first winds howled, they celebrated the festival of renewal. Painted in ochre and indigo, they sang into the storm. They offered flame and laughter. They passed on stories like torches. Even the children danced in masks of thunder clouds, their tiny feet echoing off the mosaic streets like distant, approaching hooves. They lived like fireflies, brief, bright, and beloved. When the sun set, the city shone from within. Lanterns turned the streets into rivers of amber. Musicians played from every stairwell, every balcony, every carved-out crevice of the storm god's temple. Dancers spun on rooftops of glass, as if to taunt the storm's coming hand. Storytellers spoke of monsters made of rain, of lovers turned to lightning, of children born during the flash and gone by the rumble. And always, beneath the tales, was the beat. We are temporary, and that is our glory. The towers, they caught the moonlight like prisms. At night, the city became a constellation lowered from the sky, a jewel, a dream, a mirage made real by the will of a storm. They were not afraid. They knew. The storm god was not cruel. He was inevitable, and they were his chosen, the ones who built not in defiance but in harmony with the ephemeral. So they etched their names into the columns. They left fingerprints in the silicon. They burned songs into the night. And when they died, when the storms came, they smiled, because they knew this was not the end, only the beginning of another beginning. And so the city of storms stands, for now, glittering beneath a sky that never forgets, a rainbow of memory, a monument to the present moment, and a promise that even in destruction, there is art, there is life, there is the storm, and it will come again.
Head fog slowing you down, reality feeling a bit off. Snap back with Ubic, the fast-acting oral spray that puts you back in control. It's you, only better, Ubic.
The Many-Faced Man. It began with a whisper, a vanishing here, a face forgotten, an absence unnoticed in the shuffle of days. No grand event, no falling star, no proclamation. Just Mrs. Patel from the corner store, gone. Her son blinking at the empty register. A teacher no longer teaching, her name slipping between chalk dust and time. A neighbour whose dog sat whimpering by the door, waiting for a hand that would never return, and in their place, a new face, or perhaps not new, but the same. An old man, always the same old man, hunched and muttering with a face like curdled milk, a jaw that worked without words, eyes squinting as though straining against a sun no one else could see. His skin sagged like old bread dough, left too long in the oven. His fingers were long and yellowed, and he always smelled of something sour, like rot, like mildew, like time folding inward. At first he was an anomaly, then a curiosity, then he was everywhere. Paul saw them before he knew what he was seeing, on the subway lined against the walls in stiff suits mumbling, at the grocery store moving with slow, deliberate hands, as if they'd never held fruit before. Ravi dismissed it as urban paranoia. "People get old," he said, turning the radio louder to drown out the noise in the world. Denise ignored it entirely, wrapped in deadlines and exhaustion. But Sandy, she watched, she counted, and she saw them multiply. Each week another face missing, another ill-tempered old man taking their place. No one spoke of it. The world rolled forward. People adapted, as they always do, until the adaptation itself became impossible. The first reports were dismissed. Conspiracy, hysteria, political sabotage, unreliable witnesses muttering about people vanishing from their beds. Then the footage leaked. A woman walking home. A shadow, bending, stretching, consuming. The camera catching only a flicker, a static smear in the air where she once stood. And in her place, a new figure, a different shape, or maybe the same old man. By the time the world understood, it was too late. Governments collapsed into frantic directives. Cities choked in panic. News feeds flooded with the same message. Stay inside. Lock your doors. Trust no one. But how do you fight what wears the face of the forgotten? What replaces its prey with a slow, steady patience like water eroding a cliffside, grain by grain? They were not killing. Not in the way people understood death. There were no bodies, only absences, only replacements. And by the time someone noticed, they had already changed. The neighbor, the friend, the mother. Paul, Ravi, Denise, and Sandy held on longer than most. They moved like ghosts through their own city, stealing supplies from dead shelves, sleeping in forgotten spaces where the old men had not yet gathered. They whispered to one another in the dark. "We can't be the only ones. There has to be a way to stop it. There has to be someone left." But each week, they lost ground. Each day, the world grew quieter, filled only with the muttering chorus of 1,000, a million shuffling, sagging, gnawing-jawed old men. Denise was the first to go. One night, she stepped away to check their traps for food. She never came back. Paul swore he heard a sigh, a sound like sand shifting underfoot. And when he turned, he saw her shadow stretch too far, folding into itself, its edges dissolving like mist. And then, a new figure in the alley, stooped, mumbling, moving as if it had always been there. They ran. Ravi went next. Not in the night, not alone, but in the light of morning as they scouted the edges of the city, searching for others. He turned a corner and there he was, himself. An echo, a duplicate, an aged, ruined version of Ravi muttering in his own cadence, his own voice, but cracked and brittle, as if spoken through fractured teeth. Paul grabbed his arm, pulled him away, but it was too late. Ravi's body twisted as silent screams swallowed whole, his skin unraveling into strands of smoke, folding into the other. And then there was only the old man, standing in his place, staring at Paul with those milky, squinting eyes. Sandy dragged him away before he could scream. Paul didn't last the week. One morning, Sandy woke to silence. No rustling, no breath, Only a vacancy in the room, his bag still half-packed, his shoes still laced, and outside, sitting on a curb, another one of them. He turned, lips moving around words that never came, and she saw Paul's face in that wrecked, rotting frame. She ran until her lungs were knives. Now Sandy is alone. The streets are filled with them, shuffling, mumbling, swaying as though waiting for something unseen. She is the last. She knows this. She has heard the radios fall silent, has seen the last lights of human life snuffed from the cityscape. The world does not belong to her kind anymore. It belongs to them, to him, the many-faced man, the infestation, the invasion so slow, so patient, so unnoticed that by the time the war began, it was already lost. She wonders in the end what will happen to her. Will she fade? Will she dissolve like the others? Will she see her own reflection in the hunched backs of 1,000 duplicates? Or will she simply be gone? There is no one left to answer. Only the shuffling of old men, a chorus of whispers, a tide of sagging skin, reaching, waiting, watching as she takes her last step into a world that no longer knows her name.
Lost in the drift, time's melting, and your mouth tastes like yesterday's dreams. Equi lines of flow, one sip, and it now makes sense again. Tangerine skies, ticking clock, the hum of the universe. Ubik, you were never really gone.
A comprehensive inquiry into the nature and manifestations of vanishing cats, with observational accounts, practical considerations, and theoretical postulations regarding their apparent breach of conventional spatio-temporal constraints. Introduction. On the study of vanishing cats. It is widely accepted among those of a certain observational rigor, whether amateur enthusiast or seasoned chronicler of feline phenomena, that all cats, without exception, possess powers beyond the strict limitations of physics as commonly understood. Most such abilities, ranging from elasticity of form to the localized suspension of inertia when leaping in improbable arcs, have been adequately documented. However, this present study seeks to address a phenomenon less commonly observed, more poorly understood, and vastly more inconvenient for those who seek to interact with the subjects in question, namely, the vanishing cat. This phenomenon, though rare, has been witnessed with sufficient frequency to warrant serious analysis, not only for its implications regarding the fundamental structure of space and time, but for the practical difficulties it presents to individuals attempting to feed, befriend, or locate such entities within the expected parameters of conventional reality. Section 1. Taxonomy and defining characteristics. It must be stated with the utmost clarity. Not all black and white cats are vanishing cats, but all vanishing cats are black and white. This assertion, while contentious among skeptics, has been borne out by field observation. The precise mechanisms by which the dichromatic nature of these cats correlates with their ability to defy corporeal permanence remains a matter of debate. Speculations include, but are not limited to, a quantum interference pattern wherein black and white coloration functions as a binary switch, permitting oscillation between existing and not existing. The invocation of an ancient and largely forgotten feline pact with unseen forces, wherein those of two-toned fur gain favor in return for a temporary withdrawal from the material plane. The possibility that such cats do not in fact vanish at all, but instead convince the observer that they have vanished, suggesting a species-wide mastery of advanced cognitive manipulation. Section 2. Observational accounts and practical difficulties. Reports of vanishing cats share remarkable consistency across cultures, geographical locations, and historical periods. common narrative structures include the following. 1. The doorway event. A cat is observed waiting at a threshold, meowing in a tone suggesting both impatience and condescension. The observer, believing themselves subject to a simple request, moves to open the door. Upon completion of this action, the cat is found to be absent. Extensive search reveals no sign of departure or continued presence. The observer is left questioning whether the cat was ever there at all. 2. The feeding paradox. An individual, believing themselves to be in possession of a hungry cat, prepares a meal in accordance with standard protocols. The cat, which had moments earlier been present and engaged in anticipatory tail flicks, is, upon turning back to serve the meal, no longer in evidence. The food, however, will be consumed if left unattended, leading to uncertainty regarding whether the cat has truly vanished or merely exists in a state of semi-visibility when in proximity to sustenance. 3. The lap apparition. A cat settles upon a lap, assuming a position of extreme comfort, often accompanied by rhythmic vibratory emissions. Purring. The human, lulled into complacency, ceases movement so as not to disturb the cat. Sometime later, whether minutes or hours, the individual becomes aware that the warmth and weight previously perceived have ceased to exist. The cat is found in another location, behaving as though it had never been upon the lap at all. This suggests the possibility of localized, short-range teleportation or a temporary disruption in the human's capacity for linear perception. Section 3. Theoretical considerations and philosophical implications. The question of where a vanishing cat goes remains unanswered. There are several prevailing hypotheses. The cat does not travel, but instead enters a state of superposition, existing in all possible locations until observed. The cat, by means unknown, momentarily enters the realm of the unseen, a dimension occupied primarily by misplaced objects and the intentions of those who forget why they entered a room. The cat does not, in fact, vanish, but instead ceases to be relevant to the observer's immediate narrative, thus exiting this particular version of reality and continuing uninterrupted in another. Regardless of explanation, it is evident that vanishing cats operate beyond the conventional boundaries of logic. The practical implications of this phenomenon are considerable. While most cats are known to disregard human schedules and expectations, vanishing cats do so with a level of commitment bordering on ideological. They cannot be called contained or relied upon in any capacity that does not serve their own inscrutable ends. Yet, despite their transient nature, their presence is undeniable. Even after their departure, one may yet feel the ghost of their weight, the lingering warmth where they sat, the faint suggestion of a paw print pressed into the memory of fabric. In conclusion, the study of vanishing cats remains an ongoing field, fraught with uncertainty, plagued by paradox, and fundamentally unsuited to those who require definitive answers. However, it may be said with confidence that should one be fortunate enough to witness such a cat in the brief moments it permits itself to be seen, one should, at the very least, offer it food, even if it is no longer there. And so we bid you farewell, dear listeners, with full hearts and curious minds. We hope today's transmission has tickled your brain meats and gently realigned your chakras. May you walk away a little wiser, a little weirder, and deeply moisturized in the radiant glow of Felinus the Chonker, first of the lounge, king of the cozy realm, whose purrs shape galaxies and whose naps define eternity. Go now in peace, cradle your snacks, and may your lap always be warm. All hail Felinus.
You reconstitute yourself, returned from the minus world, dripping with afterimage, stitched back together from misremembered light, and a low hum you can't unhear. Your hands flicker, unsure of their outlines. Your name hovers a few inches above your head, out of reach, like a balloon caught in a ceiling fan. People speak, but you hear them through layers of aquarium glass. Their eyes slide past you, then return, startled, as if you'd flickered into frame from some unsanctioned reel. You walk familiar streets that don't quite fit the mold they once wore, slightly off color, slightly rearranged. Every corner turned feels like a test you weren't told to study for. You smile, you function, you pass. But the air still carries the taste of not being, and your shadow trails just a half-second late. You're here, but the thread is fraying again. And somehow, you know you will likely vanish once again. This has been a production of The Moon and the Moth, Madhya engineered, and generative clockwork design by Kaizo Automata. All rights reserved.